So in today's webinar, the main focus is to discuss the two new features that we have introduced in our latest release. One is the GUI Ed plugin, the other one is the C preprocessor. So for the attendees who are seeing MapleMBSE for the first time, I'll give you a quick introduction of what MapleMBSE is, what advantages that it can bring to your organization, and then we will discuss what a configuration file is, because both the features that we are going to discuss today are based on creating new configurations for MapleMBSE views. So the main advantage MapleMBSE can bring in is it can accelerate the introduction of MBSE in your digital enterprise. This is mainly done because using MapleMBSE's view, MapleMBSE provides a spreadsheet view of your system model, which could either be defined, let's say, in using SSML or using Arcadia methodology and so on. So in MapleMBSE can hide the complexity of this modeling language and bring in more effective cross-discipline collaboration. And this eventually leads to reduce in project risk and cost. So the way MapleMBSE is able to achieve this is using a model transformation language. So the model transformation language is what gives us the view or a spreadsheet view using Excel. And we always maintain a synchronized bidirectional connection between our spreadsheet interface or Excel and the system model. And the views that MapleMBSE can produce, these are completely customizable. And these customizable views are possible by changing the configuration file. So the configuration file is nothing but it's just a text file which queries your model element, queries your system model to bring in model information. You also have the capability to limit the scope of the configuration file to like certain part of the model and so on. So like I said, the focus for today's webinar is more on the new features. So if you would like to know more about MapleMBSE, or if you'd like to see a demo, you could get in contact with us, or there are other webinars which explains in detail how the connection to system model works and so on. So with MapleMBSE, some of the typical use cases or applications that we involve with are to create views for interface control, trade-off analysis, safety analysis, and so on. So again, all these views are customizable by creating new configuration files. So a configuration file, it is nothing but, like I said, told you, it's just a text file with queries to your system model. So you define the configuration file. If you already use MapleMBSE, we used to do this with the Eclipse editor using the MapleMBSE editor plugin. Then you define your own queries, or you can use your own text editor to create the configuration file and so on. So this is how we have been creating new configurations to your system model. So with the new features that we have introduced, specifically the GUI plugin and the C preprocessor, we'll be able to generate views with minimum effort from the user. So the configuration file, like I mentioned to you, they are just queries. So the model transformation language that we are using to convert your system model into spreadsheet views, we call that as query path expression. So a query path expression, basically, it's just queries which tells MapleMBSE the way we have to transform the system model into views as tables or matrices. And the QPE will also help you to create custom queries to view your model information. So this is where you have the capability to limit or to scope the part of the model that you want to expose to the user. You can query your model to find some key elements or properties of an element. You can easily manage traceability by querying the model. For example, if you want to see traceability between a requirement or a different model element and so on, you'll be able to define your own queries. And another advantage that you can also get with the query path expression is you can check for model quality. For example, you can query your whole model to find constraint parameters that has not been assigned to or assigned with a specific data type and so on, or a requirement with certain tag values, either like reviewed or requirement that has a tag value as accepted and so on. So you'll be able to define your own query. So again, all this is possible using the query path expression. And for the GUI editor part, Sergio will give us an explanation and also a live demo on how the plugin will be used.
For this live demo, I'm going to be assuming two major things. The first one is that you already open your model inside MagicDraw or Cameo systems. And the second one is that you have installed already MapleMBSE and its plugin in the same folder or directory where you are executing these MagicDraw or Cameo systems software. So the idea behind the creation of the MBSE files, like Rani said, is like to make sure that we can query in an easy way, like some of the elements that we have in, for example, this containment tree, and pass those elements in a tabular view using the QP expression. The QP expression, unfortunately, is not as simple as just saying which folder or which block or which property you want to see. Unfortunately, SysML makes all of this more complicated than that. Speaking about features and different kind of classes for speaking about like the different elements. So in order to simplify all of that, we have added a menu item on the top of the menus here that you can click for opening the configuration editor, and that will give you access to this tab where we have like the MapleMBSE configuration editor. So far, we have created a list of templates that we think can be a good introduction for like use cases and useful for like a beginner user, but eventually we want to expand this list to deeper and more exclusive use cases and than the ones that we have here right now. So a quick review of what we're seeing here is like the block template. This block is related to like the view of like all the blocks related to a particular package and their properties. We can see here some of the samples of the image that we will generate based on the elements that we have. So the next one is package. Package will do basically the table view of the three packages of how they assemble each other. And the last one that I'm going to demo live right now is the hierarchy. And this one, it shows the different blocks and how they contain each other. In this particular case, I'm going to be using the spacecraft. All of these blocks, you can see, like, for example, a spacecraft has like a communication system that has an amplifier, or the spacecraft has an avionics system that has a storage, etc., etc. So the idea in this case is seeing all of these elements in a tabular view using MapleMBSE. The way how we're going to generate this MBSE file then is we are going to grab this and the spacecraft itself. We are going to be dragging it all the way to the space where it says data source. We are going to drop it there. As you can see here, we already selected the class spacecraft. And at the moment I did that, the export button enabled itself. And I just need to click export and put a name to the export file that I'm going to be generating here. In this case, I'm just going to call it export. And then once I have that exported, you can just go to MapleMBSE. I am going to be restarting MapleMBSE. And I'm going to be using the export file that I just created. And once I log in to the same model that I had before, we can say the same information live now with the bidirectionality that Bernie was speaking about of all the components of the model. We can see again, like the spacecraft has the avionics systems that has the storage, or the spacecraft that has a communication system that has an amplifier. And basically, this is the power that MapleMBSE has with its transformation language. And with minimal input, we were able to generate such view without needing to know anything about SysML or its meta model. Okay, I give the floor back to you, Brian.
Okay, so we saw how the GUI editor is able to generate new configuration files. And the next feature is C preprocessor. So this is just, we have made sure that you are able to launch the configuration file using a C processor. So what this will do is it's going to give you the advantage to maintain configuration file. So if you already have a configuration file or a library of configuration files defined, you'll be able to import the configuration file into a new config files. So the other advantage that the C preprocessor, integrating it with the C preprocessor also gives us is you can define a template that, for example, let's say we want to define a template for hierarchy or to generate a ICD requirements or functional decomposition and so on. So there will be a predefined template, and we can create a configuration file in which the user will need to provide just the data source and the template that has to be imported. So just giving these two information, and now if you launch a config file, we'll be able to connect to the model and bring in those views. And the other advantage that we also get with this is defining variables. So if you are using custom profile across different projects, example, let's say I have defined a hierarchy in which I want for up to level 3, I get information about components on a certain project. And then I want to use the same configuration file to a different project. So I could just define a variable where I could say like the components are with some custom stereotypes in this project, but in another project, I have defined the components with a different set of stereotypes. By defining a variable that will just alter the stereotypes, the user can change the stereotype, launch the configuration file, connect to the other project, and get the same view. But in this case, we are getting information from a different project. So again, for this, I'll show you a quick demo of using the C preprocessor. So here I have already defined a configuration file. So for example, let's say this is how you define a configuration file previously using MapleMBSE. So I have defined a configuration file to get the requirements as a nested structure. So level 1 requirement, level 2, level 3, and so on. So this is the traditional configuration file you will define. But so here in this case, what I've said is that this is going to be my import template for requirement. So in the main configuration file or the file that I'm going to launch, I have defined with certain variables saying, okay, this is the variable that will contain the requirement stereotype. The other one is for the data source, a variable called nested requirements, and the data source is in the root model. You're going to have some base requirements in which is going to contain the requirement and so on. So that with these two details, like for the stereotypes and also for the data source where the requirements or which part of the model the requirements that I want to view, and then I'm just including one of the template that's already defined. So the necessary criteria for this is the import template and the main configuration file, so which is the requirement sheet, they need to reside in the same directory or in the same folder. So that's the only thing. And once we define it, if I launch the config file, we'll be able to import the predefined template. So for example, let's say here, the data source that I've already defined for this config file is I want to see the requirements that are in a folder or in a package called as the base requirements. So let's say from my model, so I opened a model in Cameo in which I want to see the requirements tree. So nested requirements, and I want to view these requirements in MapleMBSE. So here, the data source, the only difference that I need to provide in the config file is name for the package. So previously we are querying the package called base requirements, but now let's say I'm interested in the package requirements. I just want to see the list of requirements that is inside the package called requirement. So I can just copy the data source, replace the data source here, and I'm going to save my config file. And I am going to restart MapleMBSE and select the requirement sheet. So same as always, we are going to log in and we are connecting to the same model. So here we have MapleMBSE open, and you can now see that we have able to see all the requirements. So for example, the level 1 is the analysis requirement, level 2 the analysis specs, and in the level 3 the list of all requirements as we can see in Cameo. So again, you can see similar to the GUI editor, with minimum input we are able to bring in information from the model. So similarly, we can define various templates, and the only input that would be needed from the user would be to provide the data source or the part of the model from which the templates needs to transform, or the template needs to load the model information, and whichever template we want to include. So once we provide these two details, you can just launch the config file, connect to the model, and we'll be able to see the views that we want to generate for MapleMBSE. And in addition to these two features, there are other interesting features that we also included with the latest releases or in the previous releases of MapleMBSE. So specifically, we have done much work, or more of our contribution has gone to creating the instance matrix view. So specifically, you can use the instance matrix view to work with the MBPLE profile that we get with Cameo or MagicDraw, which is the model-based product line engineering, in which you can define your feature model. You can use MapleMBSE to define the feature model, generate new configuration. The view of configuration is something, or that's the view that instance matrix is going to provide us, in which you're going to have the template or the feature model being displayed in the rows, and the columns are going to be the different configuration. For example, if you consider a vehicle, the columns or the different configuration would be like a sports car or a base model and so on. And the intersecting cell or the matrix itself is going to give you the capability to alter between the different existence. So for example, if it's a let's say if it's a fuel tank capacity, you can alternate between, let's say, a 55 liter or a 50 liter and so on. And you can also use MapleMBSE to link the feature model with your 150% architecture using the feature impact. And once you have defined these configuration and the links between your 150% architecture and the feature model, you can now save your changes to Cameo, and you can use Cameo or MagicDraw to generate the different variants. And the next feature that I also want to discuss is the different virtual features or different features we have included to enhance the QPE. We have included new features both for Teamwork Cloud adapter and the Capella adapter. I would like to specially mention that with the Capella adapter, the new features that we have included will help you to work with the requirements add-on to manage requirements using MapleMBSE. So you can import requirements if you already have in your traditional tools. You can import them to MapleMBSE. You can define the requirements types and so on, and then you can save your changes to the Capella model, and then you could retrieve the same information. You can link the requirements to different Capella elements, review the traceability of the Capella elements with the requirements add-on, and so on. And the other improvements that we also included is for the usability. So now you will be able to see the username for the person who has logged elements in your model. So previously you were only seeing that the specific element has been logged, but now we will see who has logged the elements too. So we have included new menu buttons in the add-ins to, for example, to save your changes to the server. So instead of using a shortcut, you could just go on to the MapleMBSE add-in, click on it and save your changes to server. We have included new status dialog box to update you when MapleMBSE is reloading, refreshing, or when you launch MapleMBSE and so on. So these are the new features that you will get with the latest version of MapleMBSE. Like Sergio mentioned, we will be continuously updating the templates. So you'll be able to see more templates in the upcoming releases. You'll be able to see more templates for the C preprocessor, so that with minimum knowledge of working with the configuration file, you'll be able to just update or do few actions to generate new configuration and connect to your system model.